Welcome to Chapter 9 of Great Expectations, where Pip's world is turned upside down as he uncovers the shocking truth about his mysterious benefactor. By my 23rd birthday, I still did not know the name of my benefactor. Herbert and I were living at Garden Court down by the river. Outside, a storm had been raging for days. The wind and rain drenched everything in its path. Today had been the worst of all. I stayed indoors all day. I tried to keep busy. In the evening, I sat in my room reading. Herbert was in France on business. I missed his cheerful face. Suddenly, I heard a footstep on the stair. I took my reading lamp into the hall. The footsteps stopped. "Is someone down there?" I called. "Yes," said a voice from the darkness below. "What floor do you want?" I asked. "I want Mr. Pip's floor," the stranger replied. "I am Mr. Pip," I said. I held the lamp over the railing, and the man came up the stairs. I could not see his face, but I could see that he wore seaman's clothes. His hair was long and gray. He looked about 60 years old. The man climbed the last stair. He looked at me as if he knew me. I did not recognize him. "What is your business?" I asked. "My business?" repeated the man. "I will tell you." The seaman entered my room and looked around with pleasure. He took off his coat and hat and held out both his hands to me. "What do you want?" I asked. I feared he might be crazy. I have waited many years for this day and come so far. "Give me a minute, please." He sat down and covered his forehead with one hand. Suddenly, he looked over his shoulder. "There's no one here with you, is there?" he asked nervously. "How can you, a stranger, come into my room and ask that question?" "You're a game one," he replied, shaking his head fondly at me. "I'm glad you growed up a game one." Suddenly, his face became familiar to me. It was the man in the graveyard. I stood face to face with my convict. He stood and held out his hands once again. I did not know what to do. I put my hands in his. He grabbed them. "You acted nobly, my boy," he said. "Noble Pip. I have never forgotten what you did for me in the churchyard." I pulled away. I was afraid he might hug me. "Keep away," I said. "I don't need thanks for what I did for you when I was a child. Just live a changed life. That is all the thanks I need." I could see that my words hurt him. I tried to soften them. "You are wet and tired. Will you have a drink before you go?" I offered. I made my convict some hot rum and water. I did not want him to stay long, so I stood while he drank. My convict told me what had happened to him after we parted. He escaped the hulks a second time and made his way to Australia, where he became a sheep farmer. He made a lot of money. "And you've done well too," he said. "How?" I started to tremble. "I have a benefactor by chance. Does your yearly income start with the number 5? He asked. My heart beat like a heavy hammer. My yearly income was £500. But how could the convict know that? We hadn't seen each other since that fateful night in the marsh. "You had a guardian before you turned 21, he continued. "Could the first letter of that man's last name be a J? Could the man's name be Jaggers?" I could not speak. I could hardly breathe. The horrible truth became clear to me. This convict was my benefactor. "Yes, Pip, dear boy, I've made a gentleman of you," the convict said. "I swore I would. I lived rough so you could live smooth. I worked hard so you wouldn't have to work. Pip, you are the gentleman I could never be." I recoiled from him as if he were a snake. It pained me to know that a criminal had paid for the life I lived. My great expectations were dust. Miss Havisham wasn't my benefactor. Estella was never intended for me. It was all a dream. What hurt the most was knowing that I had deserted Joe for a convict. The convict took my hands again. My blood ran cold. "Where will I stay?" he asked. "I must stay somewhere, dear boy." "To sleep?" "Yes, to sleep long and sound, for I've been at sea months and months." I gave the man Herbert's room. Even though I despised him, I could not let him wander the streets. My sleep that night was filled with nightmares. At breakfast, the convict told me his name was Abel Magwitch. Then he dropped a thick wallet onto the table. It was full of money. "It's all yours, dear boy," he said. "Buy horses. I won't have my gentleman walking in the mud. Buy horses to ride and horses to drive. "Stop," I cried. "I don't want your money. I want to know if the police are looking for you and how long you will be staying. You're only visiting, aren't you?" "I've come for good," he said, lighting his pipe. "I can disguise myself, but the police will hang me if I'm caught. You tell me where I'll live." I hid Magwitch in my room. When Herbert got home, I told him the whole story. The convict shoved a Bible at him. "Take it in your right hand," he said. "Swear you won't tell a soul you saw me. Kiss it." Now Herbert shared my awful secret. Our life together had taken a terrible turn. In Chapter 9 of Great Expectations, Pip's mysterious benefactor is revealed to be Abel Magwitch, the convict he helped as a child. On a stormy night, Magwitch arrives unannounced at Pip's home and discloses that he has funded Pip's transformation into a gentleman, shattering Pip's assumptions about Miss Havisham's role. Overwhelmed with disgust and guilt, Pip struggles to reconcile his dependency on a criminal with his moral beliefs. Magwitch seeks refuge, forcing Pip and Herbert into a dangerous alliance to protect him. The key lesson from Chapter 9 of Great Expectations is that appearances and assumptions can be misleading. Pip learns the humbling truth that his rise in social status was not due to Miss Havisham's patronage, but to a convict's gratitude. This realization challenges Pip's values and exposes his ingratitude toward those who truly cared for him. Like Joe, it underscores the idea that true worth lies not in wealth or status, but in character and loyalty. This is the end of Chapter 9. I hope you enjoyed it and found it intriguing. See you in the next chapter.